At this time, I am honored to welcome our first distinguished guests for an exclusive live discussion. IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel and his Chief Communications Officer, Terry Lemons. This session promises to be insightful as the Commissioner addresses key priorities impacting you in the tax profession. Please join me in welcoming the Commissioner of the IRS and Terry Lemons to the stage. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Come on. We're not morning people. Try it again. Come on. There we go. Thank you. I really need that. I'm a night owl, so bear with me as I go through this. So I want to thank Scott and the NATP leadership team for having the commissioner here. And we, right now at the IRS, we're trying to do things a little differently. And as part of that, instead of just doing a standard keynote speech, we are trying to make these a little more conversational and having a Q&A about what's going on at the IRS. We just find it's a little bit more humanizing, essentially, instead of somebody getting up and giving a speech. And if you go around to some of our sessions that we're doing around the country, we're doing a lot more of this. So Commissioner Werfel is the 50th Commissioner of the IRS, and this is a really critical time at the agency. He's a different commissioner, so we're taking a little bit different approach to this keynote, essentially. So with that.
Or you could say that that's Terry's politically correct way of saying, we tried some speeches, they were boring, so let's try something different.
There are a few things in taxes that are boring, right? I mean, what's he talking about? So, we're going to do a little bit of a kind of Tonight Show format here, a little Q&A. So to steal the commissioner's line, I guess away we go. Commissioner, any opening comments?
Well, I want to start by recognizing NATP and all the work that this organization does to help carry out a successful tax system in the United States. People often ask me, what are some of the things that you didn't expect or learned when you came to the IRS about the job, about the role? And one of the big learnings for any IRS commissioner is that the IRS does not deliver the tax system alone. It is a network of different organizations and people and entities that have to come together almost like puzzle pieces. And if we can come together effectively, communicate, partner, leverage each other, then we will deliver a more successful system. If the IRS thinks we can do it on our own and is closed off from feedback and input and collaboration, then we're going to fail. And I view NATP as one of those key puzzle pieces together with the IRS that is essential to come together. So it's why I'm here. I wanted to make sure that, that this organization and all of you understood how important we believe tax professionals are to making the whole system work. And we want your input, your feedback. I've grown up in government. I have thick skin. I can take it. I think you need to have thick skin to be the IRS commissioner. So we have IRS employees here this week. And the idea here is to tell us what's going on and the things that we can do to better position you and the organization for success.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for people here at the conference, when you walked in, if you saw some of the graphics, the ocean scenes and all that, it struck me coming in that the relationship between the IRS and the tax professional community is very much a symbiotic one. We couldn't run the tax system without you, so you are a critical part of what we are doing down the road. So Commissioner, right now, it's really a historic time at the IRS. I mean, we have Inflation Reduction Act funding. We have major transformation efforts underway. How do you see some of that playing out, and how does that affect the tax professional community?
Yeah, I do think we are at an inflection point and have a historic opportunity. After all those years of budget cuts and underinvesting in IRS capacity, our people, our technology, our infrastructure, and during that same period of time, so let's call it roughly 2010 to 2022, we saw a lot of changes in the tax system that required the IRS and others to do more filers, hundreds or thousands of changes to the tax code, the introduction of new substantial programs like the Affordable Care Act and others that gave the IRS new responsibilities, new currencies, globalization, more movement of money around the world into different tax jurisdictions, the switch to the evolution to a gig economy, and the list goes on. And so when all these requirements are changing and you're divesting year over year in IRS infrastructure, it really created gaps. And I feel like in 2022, when you added the pandemic in, it was too much to bear. And so when you look back at the day the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law, you see an IRS with record low levels of service on the phone, record low staffing levels, record low audit rates at every cohort, the largest set of paper backlogs we've had, and stagnant technology. And the situation was fairly dire. And then enter the Inflation Reduction Act and tens of billions of dollars to do two things: to reverse these trends, to immediately infuse resources to allow the IRS to get back to historical levels of performance and all the things I just mentioned, but also because of the substantial amount of the investment, an opportunity to build an IRS for the future. So when I think about it in two ways. Today, the people that we serve are expecting us to use these resources to fix gaps and get back to sometimes what I call par performance, or what we're used to, but even do better than that. And then the other vision I have is future IRS employees, actually. I think about IRS employees 25, 30 years from now, looking back and saying, in 2022, 2023, 2024, in that time frame, that version of the IRS was given this substantial amount of money to build an IRS for the future. What did they do with it? Did they squander it? Or did they really create something that was sustainable and lasting, and it was a turning point in terms of creating a modern tax agency that is high performing? And so I like to feel, I call that a healthy stress, a healthy pressure, as I think about future IRS employees thinking back to this point in time and saying, what an unusual moment. Tens of billions of dollars to invest in an organization that was struggling and really modernize and transform it. What did they do with that opportunity? And that's a bit of my rallying cry to make sure we're doing the things we need to do to not just do the day-to-day stuff, but to build that IRS for the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. It's, let me ask the audience a question. How many of you were in practice more than 15 years ago? Yeah. And can you tell a difference on the IRS, like over the last 5 years compared to when you first came into the practice? I mean, yeah, this is what we're talking about with the funding. And this has been a long-term deterioration. And when the commissioner talks about this extra funding, keep in mind, this pot of money we got from the Inflation Reduction Act, it's not part of the annual budget process. This was a set-aside, basically, that allows us to do modernization and things. I mean, it's very hard to keep track of the budget process in Washington, even for those of us who are in D.C., but it really is a special moment in the history of the IRS to have this money and attempt to do these foundational changes. Commissioner, you talked about looking, this being a moment in time, but there really has been a feeling on the IRS team that we've got to make the most of this opportunity. And where do you see that transformation taking us in terms of things like compliance and service? Where do you see this, what's this going to mean for the people here in this room and who are watching on the stream?
Well, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of learnings when you come into this job. And I think you're always on your learning curve. And I think the last day I look around the IRS Commissioner's office, I'll think there's a lot more to learn and a lot more to do. One of my other learnings, in addition to the fact that the IRS doesn't do this alone, is the importance of communication and the importance of laying out a vision for the IRS that is digestible, that is nonpartisan. Because when I first got to the IRS, weeks later we issued our first strategic plan under the Inflation Reduction Act. It was already written by the time I had gotten there. And I read it my first day on the job. I took it home that night. It was about 200 pages. And I couldn't disagree with anything in there. Like, it was all the right to-do list items. But what I reflected to the team was, how am I going to describe this to my aunt or uncle in very simple terms? And as I've thought about it, it's something I call the Thanksgiving test, where I picture myself sitting at Thanksgiving dinner across the table from my ultra-conservative aunt who's sitting next to my ultra-liberal uncle. And someone at the other end of the table says, "So Danny, what are you going to do with all that money?" And I have to answer the question. And if I can answer it in a way where both aunt and uncle are like, "That seems like a good idea," then I've passed the Thanksgiving test, because it's nonpartisan, it's understandable. The other thing is, it can't be a vision that's coming to a theater near you in 2035. It has to be meaningfully implemented in the short term. And so I have been working for over a year now to try to hone a vision statement that would pass my Thanksgiving test. And I'll probably continue to work on it as it evolves. But the way I've become fond of laying it out is, again, bringing it back home to my family to make it real, and mentioning that my parents, God bless them, who are in their 80s, have never used an ATM machine in their lives, and my children, who are in their 20s, have never been in a bricks and mortar bank in their lives. And what it means to modernize the IRS is to build an IRS for emerging and future generations of taxpayers who will expect and demand to do all of their business and commerce and work from their smartphones and from their tablets. And if you look at the IRS today, we have work to do. There is a gap between that vision of all taxpayers doing all interactions with the IRS virtually or digitally if they choose, versus where we are today. So in very plain terms, I describe our modernization as a generational imperative to meet the demands of where taxpayers are headed. And we have a lot of work underway to do it, improving our online accounts, both tax pros, individuals, and businesses, making it a thing of the past that you have to submit anything on paper, and just really accelerating the digital format that is available to everyone in the tax system. And since I mentioned ATM machines and bricks and mortar banks, I think about it in terms of what banks have been able to achieve in terms of their virtual platforms, their online banking platforms. And I'm inspired by the fact that if I want to, for whatever reason, go check out my April 2021 bank statement at my bank, I'm 3 or 4 clicks away from doing that. But that is not the case for you or your clients to get access to any segment or component of their tax information to make their experience in interacting with the IRS more seamless. Now, so for my aunt and uncle, like, okay, they're shaking their head, they're good. The next part of the vision is equally important, and that is, if we modernize in this way, we're going to unlock capacity. Because as banks modernized, less people went into bricks and mortar banks. Like my children no longer need to go. If my parents hand my daughter a check, she doesn't walk into the bank and deposit it. She whips out her iPhone and deposits it electronically using her camera within seconds. So that's a lack of paper and a visit that has now been avoided. And so and by the way, also the 1-800 calls drop precipitously as online banking has become more sophisticated. So all of this is in our future. Unlock capacity. Not no people coming into our walk-in centers, but less people. Not no people calling our 1-800 number, but less people. And what do we do with that capacity? And I think it's two things. I think we help people that need it the most, and we scrutinize those that warrant it the most. And when I think about helping people that need it the most, there's a whole different range of examples you could give, where you have people online right now on our phone lines who have problems that could be much more readily solved using technology. And I want to move those people into the technology space and be great customer service organization for them, but just not have them in the phone lines in the queue. And that will free up the phone line for those who can't get their questions answered easily with a digital or a text solution, but actually need a person. And some of the inspiring examples that inspire me in terms of helping people that need it the most, I start, for example, with 6 million Americans a year who are eligible for the Earned Income Tax credit but don't claim it. So this is widely considered one of the most important anti-poverty programs that the US government has ever enacted, and 6 million eligible Americans are not claiming the credit. To me, something is missing. There's a failure, a disconnect. And with our new capacity, I want to do something to help solve that disconnect. I also think, and we'll get to this later in the conversation, I think, another way to help people that need it the most are victims of tax scams and schemes. And there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of vulnerable populations that are getting exploited by those that are seeking to enrich themselves using the tax system as their weapon. And the IRS could be doing more to disrupt these scams, to support victims, to educate. And these are the types of things that our unlock capacity will help us do. That is also an imperative that's emerging in the information age that we live in. It is clear that unless we take action, scams and schemes will proliferate, and we need to do more. And a modern IRS will help us there. And then on scrutinizing those that warrant it the most, I mean, I start with those that are perpetrating the scams and schemes. And in too many cases, these individuals or organizations are getting away with it. And so there's an opportunity to bulk up our enforcement of those that seek to enrich themselves at the expense of others. And of course, during our period of underinvestment, we fell behind on those that are seeking to enrich themselves at the expense of the government's bottom line. And that's just basic tax evasion. And where we fell the most behind during these 12 years is in complex scenarios. When we weren't investing in subject matter expertise, data science, all the various tools that we need in our tool belt to assess non-compliance in our most complex areas of the tax code and our complex filers. That's where we have the more catching up to do, and that's where tax evasion is top of mind in terms of cracking down on it at the IRS. Well, yeah. Now, I think my aunt and uncle are there, maybe. Maybe they give me a B plus. I've got some more work to do, but that's the basic vision of where it is today. And next year, I might have evolved it more, but the reality is the work won't change. It's how we describe to the American people and to our various stakeholders what our true north is and what we're aiming for. That I will continue to workshop, but the underlying work will be the same.
Yeah, I guess, Commissioner, in a sense, we have to pass the turkey test with more than just your relatives at the end of the day.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, this is, and there are many, many skeptics. There are many counter narratives out there in terms of what it means to provide the IRS funding in this moment. There are narratives often operating in a political arena and a political space. And I think that's why I went back to that nonpartisanship. It's got to be a vision that resonates regardless of what your political stripe is. And I think whether you're a hardcore liberal or a hardcore conservative, you see the reality of the way the world is evolving and how the world has become more virtual in terms of how business is conducted? And should we invest in the IRS and have it meet the moment? Or should we continue to divest and be a paper-based organization with, that's bricks and mortar based, that has the level of 1-800 calls that we have that's going to be outsized versus, by the way, other tax jurisdictions around the world and other industries, especially the financial services industry? I say it's not a political issue. I think it is just, to me, it's more common sense in terms of what it means to modernize today. But it's not free. We have to build these solutions. And unfortunately, to build these solutions, it's not just one gadget or widget we can put on our IRS to Go app platform. There's a lot of technology and architecture and data cleanup and training and process reengineering that has to happen to make it all work. And that's just sweat equity and rolling up sleeves. And that's what we're doing behind the scenes at the IRS. One form at a time, one process at a time. And that can be frustrating because people on the outside will say, well, they got all this money. Where's the high functioning app platform that works as well as my banks? It's coming, but there's work being done behind the scenes. But my goal and hope is that each year, at filing season or wherever you find yourself interacting with the IRS, that you're seeing new capacity, new capability, new functionality. This form is simpler. This form is now electronic. I can now do this. I can now do that. I'm noticing more chatbot technology each and every time I come into the IRS, and it's actually helpful. So all of that, it's a kind of cumulative build brick by brick. And my big kind of rallying cry at the IRS is let's get started. You know, I know it's a big project. It's going to take many years, but let's swim out to that first buoy, I like to say, and not just stare at the journey across the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean and think, gosh, this is going to be one tough swim. Agreed. Let's get in the ocean. Let's start.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what the transformation effort has really been focused on. Is not just building towards something in 2035, it's been trying to get real-world incremental changes out there. Commissioner, one of the things that I've kind of heard while talking to people in my role is, the tax professional community, there's concern about what the future looks like and what the role for tax professionals is. But this transformation effort really is a lot about helping tax professionals do their jobs, giving them more tools. Yeah. It's not just about, improving, service on the 1040 lines. It's not just about adding things like direct file. It's really aimed at helping a tax professional community, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing about the vision. And I have this, potentially this unique opportunity, for example, to stand in front of IRS employees and tell them, we are modernizing, we are automating, we are bringing in AI and robotics to make ourselves more efficient, but we're also hiring. I don't think many leaders of organizations can say that. And we're hiring thousands of employees each year over the next few years. And the reason is because I think we would be deluding ourselves if we think that even with all this advanced technology, that is sufficient to deal with the complicated tax system that we have. We have an extraordinarily complex tax system with a lot of diversity across different taxpayers, organizations. And it's ever evolving and changing. And there are all kinds of complicated tensions that exist in our tax system. I mentioned scams, there's issues of equity and fairness. There are innumerable challenges and potholes that honest taxpayers often find themselves in because of the complexity of our tax system. And you're not gonna AI your way out of that. You need humans, workers, tax professionals to do it. And we're not gonna do it alone, as I started with. So the path to success is not paved only through technology. The path to success is paved with a combination of a variety of different factors, including helping cultivate and nurture a highly successful, empowered tax professional community that where we're listening, where it is we're helping you with tools and access and customer service that is helping you solve problems seamlessly and effectively for your clients in a world in which it is not easy because of that complexity of the tax system and the complexity of the world we live in today. And so I'm excited about the opportunity that we have, but it is not just about simplifying the journey of, the college student who can now do their taxes from their phone. That's part of it. But it would be, I think, unrealistic to think that that's the only solution at play. We understand, I think, the variation of people out there and organizations out there, and they're all on different journeys. And we need to improve the technology and the training and the partnership to serve as many of those journeys as we can.
That's a great point. And one of the things that I think that we have agreement inside the IRS is that we need more perspective from the tax professional community inside the agency. I know in my organization and in others, we need more of your perspective. And if you're interested in a career change, we need people with accounting backgrounds. Go to USA Jobs. We've got a lot of opportunities. And the nice thing is that maybe those 80-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks around the tax deadlines, maybe it'll be a little smoother. So we've got opportunities out there if people are interested in that.
Terry, when I spent most of my career in government, and so there's memories I have early in my career where I was at the Office of Management and Budget, which is essentially an oversight organization, decides the budget. And when I was there and overseeing the IRS in various capacities, I had the impression as a young analyst that the IRS reputation for me was, we got this. And I actually had meetings with IRS leaders, commissioners going back many, many years. Where I walked out of the room feeling like that's exactly the impression. Like, here are ideas, here's what we're hearing, we're a stakeholder, we got this, right? And so I have an opportunity as commissioner now to change that culture. Because the reality is we don't have it without help. We don't have it unless we're listening to input. We can learn from the people in this room. We can learn from state commissioners around the country. We can learn from industry. We can learn from software providers. And we can learn from our own inspector general. We can learn from our congressional oversight entities. And we can learn from .orgs and individual taxpayers around the country around what we need to do to be on a continuous improvement journey. And so whether that's a fair assessment of the legacy IRS, of the we got this culture or not, my sense is that we have an opportunity now to create a sense that the IRS is an open organization that is seeking to collaborate and does not feel like we have the monopoly on the right answer, and that together we have to shape a set of solutions and paths and navigate some really difficult tensions through an honest dialogue about what the trade-offs are.
Yeah. Bottom line is we need help on these issues. Let me switch gears slightly. You mentioned AI a moment ago. That's a really hot button issue, when you look at technology and emerging trends and things like that. How many of you guys have been playing around with AI, ChatGPT or something like that in your practice? That's great. That's great. For those on the stream, probably 20% of the room held their hand up. Commissioner, can you talk a little bit about what AI is going to mean for the IRS and how we're going to approach it?
Well, it's such a big question, and people have different definitions of AI, and I think because AI carries with it both promise and risk, it's really important that in describing AI that the IRS gets specific, because you don't want to leave the public with the impression that there's some amorphous AI solution coming and that we're handing the keys over to robots, because we're not. In fact, my hope and expectation as we advance on an AI agenda is to do it in very specific swim lanes so that the public understands what we're doing with research and development and piloting and scaling AI. And let me give you one example. You mentioned ChatGPT. You know, increasingly, there is an evolution of how people research and get answers to questions on the internet. For example, if you type into irs.gov, into our query box, what is the filing deadline, the way our search engine works, you will get a series of references, like 6 or 7 or 8 reference documents that you could read. And if you read them, you will figure out what the filing deadline is, versus typing in what is the filing deadline and getting a very cogent answer that would sound something like, the filing deadline is April 15th, unless you live in Maine or Massachusetts. Due to Patriots' Day, your filing date is April 17th, unless you live in an area impacted by a disaster area. If you think you may have, search this website where you'll get information on what your filing deadline is. And that's your answer. Now, you could have gleaned the same thing from, yeah. I see, it's an exciting vision, right? And you could have all gleaned the same thing from reading the reference documents, but you save a lot of time. So there's promise there, but there's risk, because I just proposed a very simple question. There's endless permutations of the questions that taxpayers might put into this query and tax professionals, and therefore endless permutations around how this large language model, as they're calling, will generate answers. And as the IRS, we have a responsibility, a duty, whether it's a fiduciary duty or a legal duty, whatever the adjective you want to use, to provide sound information from a .gov website. And switching from a reference document that will be subject to interpretation to a direct answer carries with it a significant change that introduces a new dimension of quality control, new questions of what might be legally admissible in court, or what taxpayers can constructively rely on, or tax professionals. So in this one example, you have both promise and risk. And therefore, I go back to this point that if we're going to introduce AI, we need to lay out what we're thinking of, how we're thinking of it, and have a public dialogue around the various tensions involved in what the risk factors are. But it would be a mistake to not try and to not realize that through this effort is real efficiency, promise, and help. Now, I have the opportunity as commissioner to interact with some of the tax commissioners from around the world, which is a real honor and also a real great way of learning, because each tax authority commissioner is dealing with some similar and some different issues. The Venn diagram of the issues that I confront versus the tax commissioner of some other country is a lot more overlap than I would have anticipated. And so there have been discussions about this very question of how to use large language models in the context of tax administration. And where we are on a maturity curve globally is the world tax authorities are not ready to unpack these large language models to the public for the reason I just announced, because we have things to sort through in terms of quality control, legal admissibility, et cetera. But where the tax authorities are on the maturity curve is using it internally for things like training. So they're taking their version of the tax code, the IRC, their version of the Internal Revenue Manual, and they're putting that in a large language model, and they're giving their employees a search capability that instead of just querying and getting a set of reference point that their employees have to go through, they're getting a set of queries that their employees then can get clear answers on. And they have found that to be more manageable to quality control in the short run than the endless permutations of information that's out there in a ChatGPT type environment. So again, lots of opportunity, lots of risk, and I think the IRS has a responsibility to be risk averse, to proceed with caution, and to make sure that we are telegraphing how we're using AI in a way that does not get taxpayers concerned about how AI might be used in a way that would lead to increased burden or overtaxation. I understand those concerns, and I'm committed to making sure that we lay out a critical path that mitigates those concerns.
Yeah, that's a great point. And certainly, the IRS is an agency that's easy to stereotype. And, you can see critics out there using AI to say, well, the IRS is a runaway train on this, and they're going to use AI to, to overreach and do things like that. But the Taxpayer Bill of Rights still comes into play, even in an AI environment, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, when I got nominated to be the commissioner of the IRS, but I wasn't yet. I was going through Senate confirmation. One of the former commissioners, Fred Goldberg, graciously convened all the former IRS commissioners at a dinner at his house, and welcomed me with an advice session, and allowed me to ask questions. And at this dinner, one of the commissioners suggested that I print out a version of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and have it above my desk, always reminding me and guiding me. And I thought that was great advice. And I did that very thing. So right above my desk is a giant-sized poster of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and it catches my eye every single day because it's a reminder of what in everything we do, what we need to be mindful of. And that Bill of Rights, guarantees that we would be thoughtful and diligent and iterative in carrying out something as game-changing as AI, because taxpayers have a right to understand what steps the IRS is taking, and have an ability to understand how to engage with us most effectively. So that is a great control mechanism to make sure that we don't advance too far out without thinking about these tensions and these balance points, to make sure that we're protecting taxpayer privacy, protecting their data, preserving their right to an appeal, ensuring they have closure, all the various things that are embedded in that important Bill of Rights.
Yeah, at the same time, AI is going to help us in some of the emerging compliance work where there are problem areas with high income, corporate, and that sort of thing. That's going to give us some new capability potentially to be more efficient, right?
Yeah, that's another unlock. I mentioned earlier that where we fell behind in our 12 years of budget cuts, we fell behind in many different areas, but you assess where'd you fall the most behind, or where'd you fall more materially behind. And what has happened between 2010 and now is the types of complexity that has been available for those that don't want to play by the rules to shield their income has really proliferated, and it is increasingly more difficult for us to detect it. And there are, and I have to always emphasize this, across taxpayers, and including in high wealth, large corporations, large partnerships, there are so many CEOs, individuals, CFOs that play by the rules, want to play by the rules, and are committed to meeting their tax obligations fairly. They're going to find the most tax advantaged status they can within the rules. That's their responsibility and their right. And at the IRS, we don't want anyone to pay a penny more than they owe. So all to the better. And whatever I can do to help those CEOs and CFOs meet their obligations by playing by the rules, I'm ready to do that. But there are those that don't want to play by the rules. And if I'm a CEO or a CFO that's playing by the rules, I want two things, I think. I'm going to oversimplify it, but I want two things from the IRS. I want them to leave me alone because I'm playing by the rules. And I want them to hold my competitors who aren't playing by the rules accountable. Because it's really hard to compete for business and for success in a capitalist market economy if other companies or other organizations have a comparative advantage because they're deciding not to play by the rules and there's no IRS capacity to enforce it. So if we make the right investments, we will select the right cases for audit and avoid selecting cases for audit for those CEOs and CFOs that are playing by the rules. And we will hold people that are not playing by the rules accountable. So it's all to the benefit of a healthy economy and a healthy marketplace and a healthy tax system in our country. Now, how do we do that? Because of this complexity, it often feels like we're in the dark. We can't see without new, effective, sophisticated tools how income is shielded. It's shielded in very sophisticated ways, and we've realized we needed to up our game. I sometimes call this putting on night vision goggles in order to see what's otherwise obscured. For me, that's the AI. It's putting on night vision goggles so that we can see in certain situations where complex financial transactions are actually resulting in shielded income. It may be, for example, that a taxpayer is moving money into a shelter of some kind. It may be going on in the complexity of the way they're setting up their subsidiaries. It gets very complicated. And we could either choose to have a calculator or just an average laptop to help figure it out, or we can invest in, sometimes I tell the team, it's still your decision, but you're playing chess, and we're going to bring in that computer to help us map out all the permutations and give you a suggestion of what the next chess move should be. It's your decision, but you got the computer sitting next to you helping guide you. And I think that's just smart tax administration, to make sure the decision rests in the human, but to have that type of analytic power to understand the 1,000 various moves that a tax evader might make, and for us to make sure that we're being effective in understanding where money is being shielded. I think, again, that's something, if I can take my IRS Commissioner hat off and put my US citizen and taxpayer hat on, that's something I would want the IRS to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of playing by the rules, it's not just technology, it's also staffing. And one of the things that we've been looking at the IRS with this funding from the Inflation Reduction Act is, some basic compliance work. How many of you guys have had challenges with clients who, are debating about whether to even file taxes at some point? Yeah. One of the eye-opening things for me is that with the Inflation Reduction Act funding, it's going to help us on the technology. It's also helping us with staffing. And when you look at our non-filer situation, just in the last couple months, we have started getting more active on high-income non-filers. We've got over 100,000 non-filers out there with reported income between $400,000 up above $1 million, 100,000 of those that owe $250,000. And until we had the Inflation Reduction Act funding, we didn't have the resources to actually just send out notices to those people and pursue people that we had a pretty good idea owed a lot of money.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see hands go up on the non-filing question. Etched at the IRS headquarters on Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C., there's a phrase etched in the stone, a quote from Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, that taxes are the price we pay for civilized society. And I'm not a politician. I know people debate big government versus small government. I would imagine whether you're a proponent of big or small government, you want a government that works. But there are so many basic functions that we all rely on, basic like air traffic control, food safety in the restaurants we eat in, highway repair, law enforcement, everything that just makes it so that we don't have chaos or lawlessness is funded through the collections that the IRS takes. And so if we're not paying our taxes consistent with what Congress enacts, then we are deteriorating our ability to protect our skies and protect our citizenry from contaminants in our food. And then I recently did a speech at American University where I pointed out that NASA recently successfully launched a rocket that deflected the path of a meteorite that was 7 million miles away, traveling 40,000 miles per hour, and they hit it dead center and moved its trajectory. Now, this one wasn't coming towards the Earth, but it was a test to see that if one was coming towards the Earth, could they do it? And they successfully, for the first time, changed the trajectory of an asteroid flying through space. And it was taxpayer money that funded this rocket. So whether let's say you're like sitting at home, you're like, well, I'm not gonna fly and I don't eat at restaurants, right? Well, the whole fate of humanity in some ways rests on this team at NASA who's developing this technology, and all of it funded through the money that everyone's paying with their taxes. So it is absolutely essential that we are establishing an understanding across the US that the IRS is doing its job and has a job to do. And if you have, as we have in this situation, wealthy individuals, in this case we identified 125,000 Americans earning over $400,000 a year, 25,000 of them earning over $1 million a year, who have not filed since 2017. It is heartbreaking and concerning and angering. And then you say, well, what is the IRS doing about it? Well, we didn't have the infrastructure, the capacity to do what's necessary to both send a letter and follow up with these taxpayers. Because if we send a letter and do no follow-up, then we're taking a step back without taking any steps forward, because we're sending a signal that our letters mean nothing. So we're not going to send a letter unless we have the infrastructure behind it to follow up and make sure that we are closing the issue with that taxpayer. And so all of these things have restarted at the IRS, and my hope is that people now understand the expectation is real, that the IRS can do its job. And one of the things that's happened, I mentioned these 12 years and how the world's changed, and I alluded to the gig economy and the information age. One of the challenges that has emerged during this period of underinvestment is people getting information on social media that is often misleading, and call it a life hack, whatever you want, but it's this idea that this is how you can get free money from the government or free money from the IRS. And it's really, really bad advice. And it's causing a lot of headaches for people. It's clogging up our system with a lot of frivolous credit applications and frivolous and exorbitant refund requests. And it's causing those that fell into this trap. Maybe they're eligible for a $400 refund, but they heard on some social media platform they could get a $40,000 refund. I'm not exaggerating here. It's coming into us, and of course we're holding up those refunds. And then what's happening is that individual not only doesn't get their $40,000, but now they're not getting their $400 either, as we seek to work with that taxpayer to clean up the mess. And so there's harm being done by this misinformation. It's built on this, I think, on this premise that take your chances, because the IRS, can't catch it all. And that is a path we don't want to go down. We want to go down a path where people are understanding their civic responsibility, they're proud of their civic responsibility, they understand and they're educated about what a funded government is delivering for them, but they also just basically understand the dangers that social media presents in terms of misinformation. And we have an opportunity now with the Inflation Reduction Act to fund education campaigns, social media campaigns, to provide some myth busting out there and some better information. And again, we can't do it alone. This is an all hands on deck situation where people have to get out there and talk to their clients, in some cases their neighbors, in some cases their grandparents, because the elderly are particularly susceptible to being tricked by, for example, not on social media. It's others that are being tricked on social media, but it's the elderly who are getting tricked by the phone calls and the emails, where they are preying upon, these scam artists are sophisticated. They know, for example, they're using, I don't know if they call it this, but they're using behavioral science to determine what script works most effectively to get that person to pull their credit card out to pay a phantom tax debt. Well, elderly care deeply about their people, about their family. So if you indicate that their resources, their car is in jeopardy, but also their children's car is going to be repossessed, they're more likely to pull their credit card out. This is happening, and we need to educate our grandparents and our elderly population to don't trust. The IRS doesn't call people out of the blue. We don't threaten immediate repossession of houses or cars. We don't tell you to pay on a credit card. But that information has to get out there to these people, just like they prey on veterans. And what script works with veterans? Preying on their patriotism. And so all of these scripts that are out there require a counter-offensive of information on scams and what the truth is and what the fiction is. And this is going to be a big part of our mission. It is today, and it will be going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things we're doing to combat these social media schemes, multiple lanes we're hitting. One of which is if you look at our communication materials coming out on things like employee retention credit, key message for us is talk to a trusted tax professional. Don't rely on what you see on social media or you're hearing secondhand. Go to a knowledgeable source, a legitimate source. There are legitimate sources out on social media. TikTok has not been a great source of it. So we know we need to do more, but.
Yeah, I met with, when I travel for events like this or to meet with IRS employees, I always take time to meet with taxpayers and others in the community. I'll meet with stakeholders in Orlando later today. I'll do local media talking about the dangers of tax scams. I was in Chicago a few weeks ago, and I was in the Taxpayer Assistance Center, and I was talking to the woman who was running the center. What's going on on the ground? And she said, well, a lot of people coming in with confused by why they didn't get their frivolous credit requests. People that earn $40,000 a year wondering why they didn't get their $40,000 refund. And I said, well, where are they getting this information? She said, TikTok. And I said, oh, you mean like social media, like Facebook? She said, TikTok. And I said, oh, Instagram? TikTok. And so I was like, okay, I understood. So we have to now understand where these messages are proliferating, who are the TikTok users, so who are the communities of taxpayers that are likely to engage. Now, what I've learned, I'm not a social media expert, I'm sort of becoming one though, by necessity, is that videos on TikTok end up on Facebook and Instagram weeks later. It's like the movie in the movie house ends up on cable. TikTok videos don't stay on TikTok, they move around. So there is a viral nature to these bad information that result in us having to understand these bad tax advice things are happening on multiple social media platforms.
Yeah, totally. So what are we doing about it at the IRS? We do have a secret weapon at hand, and we've started deploying our secret weapon. I don't know if you can cue the slide here. We have been hitting all lanes, so we have a new spokesperson or a spokescat on behalf of combating social media scams.
Yeah. It's actually an interesting story behind this, which is I mentioned this is my cat, Emmett. He is a handful. You don't want to mess with him. So if he tells you there are scams out there, you need to trust. But as part of my learning journey, and I'm always on a learning curve, I was part of an international set of commissioners that were being briefed on how social media influencers are making money and how income and the earning of income is evolving in a social media influencer age. And so I got this deep dive on social media influencers. And I kept turning to the people at the table. I was out there just like you in presentation. I was like, so wait a minute, like you make money if people watch you play video games? Like, yeah. I'm like, okay, this is new. Like, wait, so this woman made millions of dollars just by posting videos of her cat? Yes. And I was like, this is fascinating to me. And so cat videos are, so if we're trying to communicate to people that are on social media a lot, clicking on things, I mean, they could have me up there talking about my time at the Office of Management and Budget and what I learned. No one's going to click on that. But apparently, cats, they will click on. And so we are just we are playing the game the way it needs to be played and not going to have our head in the sand. So I went home and I sat down with Emmett and I said, you have a job to do.
It's a perfect approach to combat social media. But we need help. We need help. And I think we need your help out in social media and other places. And if you can cue up the next slide, we need to help enlist NATP's help on this. It stands for National Association of Feline Professionals, right? But anyway, I think we're out of time here, Commissioner. Any quick closing thoughts?
Look, I want to end where I started, which is an ongoing recognition of the role that each of you play in the success of the tax system. I know it sounds overly dramatic. I bring up the example of NASA diverting a planet-killing asteroid. I actually believe we all play a role in that. We play a role in the success of public sector organizations, starting with the U.S. federal government, but it all kind of interlocks together to state government, to local municipalities, ensuring clean water, clean air, that the traffic lights work, that law enforcement is protecting our streets. All of it starts with a successful tax system. It converts, as Oliver Wendell Holmes pointed out, lawlessness to civilized society. And I'm proud to be a part of it. It's sometimes thankless, it's unheralded, it's often the forgotten key cog in the machinery that makes this country and this society function. But that's okay. I don't need to be thanked. I didn't take the job to get thanked. I took the job because I knew it was important and I wanted to be about something that was important. And you all are about that as well. So on behalf of the IRS, thank you for being part of helping us sustain and build a successful tax system into the future, and from helping save planet Earth from an asteroid that's coming to kill us. Thank you all.
Hold on.
Well, with that kind of exit, I just want to be the first one to officially say thank you for everything that you and the IRS does.
My pleasure.
I also want to thank you, Commissioner and Terry, for your enlightening discussion. Your insights on the future are truly invaluable and informational for us to help us do our job and grow the profession. But before the Commissioner leaves the stage, we want to make a special announcement. So I'm asking Larry Gray, our IRS liaison, to join us on stage.
I will come.
It is my distinct honor to present the first ever NATP Vanguard Award. This award recognizes individuals who have made significant contributions to advancing the federal tax industry, promoting fairness, efficiency, and compliance. Our inaugural recipient exemplifies these values through unwavering dedication and innovative leadership. Daniel Werfel.
Thank you
again.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. As IRS Commissioner, he has demonstrated a steadfast commitment to improving the tax system for all. His initiatives have not only begun to modernize IRS operations, but have also enhanced tax professional and taxpayer experience and compliance. I would like to take a moment to also acknowledge the incredible efforts of the entire IRS team and workforce. The strides they have made in advancing the IRS are a testament to their collective commitment in serving taxpayers and tax professionals. Their perseverance and innovation continue to drive progress of excellence and efficiency within the organization. While the work has just begun, Commissioner Werfel's priorities align closely with ours, ensuring that we move forward together towards a more efficient and effective tax system. His vision for the future and the ability to inspire and lead his team has set a new standard for excellence within the industry. Please join me again in congratulating Commissioner Danny Werfel as the recipient of our initial Vanguard Award.
Thank you again. Thank you so
Do you want
much.
to say a word? Or
Yeah.
just-
Well, I think it goes without saying that that this award is really about the people at the IRS, 95,000 strong at this point, who, like you, have put their heart and soul into making sure this tax system works effectively. And this is a workforce that has been through a lot. They haven't had the resources to train, to have the right technology. They were some of the first federal employees back with masks on early in the pandemic, social distancing and dealing with the paper backlog that had emerged. And this was the workforce that got all the individual impact payments out in the middle of the COVID crisis. I wasn't there. I watched from afar, proud of what the previous commissioner, Chuck Rettig, and the entire leadership team and the organization achieved during COVID. I think this award is a reflection of that IRS commitment to being there day in and day out, kind of like rain or shine or global pandemic. This organization can get the job done. So on behalf of the IRS, I really appreciate this award. Thank you.
Where's Courtney?
You're up.
Where's Courtney? I know.
Oh, I'll get her. She's right there.
We're kind of switching teams here.